Ready for the jury? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Was everybody able to follow my instructions and admonitions over the break?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Richters, you may resume.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Brown, I think where we left off, and we're on the topic of the self-admission of incineration of baby Annabelle, correct? We're on that topic. You know that.
Okay.
Now, you told us again, just so that we're all on the same page, that part of your opinion was based on these interrogation tapes, correct?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to show you several clips from that interrogation tape. I believe it was July 20th. Okay? This was after a call from your office to Lieutenant Vane, giving him information that Dr. Murray had thought that the baby's remains were burned, okay?
Okay.
Would you play number 50? Do I have to tell you, or you know which numbers I want?
I can play 57 or 71 sequentially.
Great, thank you.
I'm on the fire. What fire? Did you burn her? I promise on anything I didn't burn her. My dad has lots of... I didn't burn her. Are you sure? I swear on anything.
Let's go back one. Go back one and go slower, please.
I didn't burn her. Are you sure? I swear on anything. Are you sure? That I'm sure of. That I'm sure of. You didn't did you burn anything around her? Did you try to maybe melt the dirt or anything?
Stop. Put that back on, please.
You didn't did you burn anything around her? Did you try to maybe melt the dirt or anything? Was there any reason for any of that? No. Understand or anything? No, and I did nothing with fire. Nothing.
Is it possible originally you put her in the fire pit before you...
No.
I don't mean with a lit fire, but I mean put her in the fire pit.
No. What about some other heat source? Was there any heat involved in anything? This was after she was dead, so it's not No. No microwave, no oven, no nothing The towel was black. No, I mean, we know there was some sort of fire. I know it's... And I understand that.
Keep that on there. Boom.
It goes away.
No, I mean, we know there was some sort of fire. I know it's...
You remember those clips? Not the clips, but you remember the interview where that was said during the initial stage of the interview, Dr. Brown?
Yes.
Did you ignore those statements, Dr. Brown?
I did not.
Did you see her surprised, or didn't she act surprised when they asked her, tell us about the fire? Didn't you think that she was surprised by that? Yes or no?
I don't know.
Yeah. I assume, so that you're not deciding this in a vacuum, I'm assuming that you read Detective Carter's report where she claimed that Skylar lit her baby's foot with a lighter and put out the flames after they reached her chest. Did you read that in her report?
I did not read her report.
Wasn't part of this analysis, this filling the vacuum so you can come up with an opinion?
I did not read her report.
Doctor, this has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 11. And, okay, thank you.
LL.
Exhibit LL. I don't know what I said, but can you hold it up? Push, no, where, at the top where I show the, thank you. Doctor, at the very top of the page, right here, that's, Kathy Edwards is my legal assistant. But I sent this March 15th, 2018 email to you, is that correct?
Yes.
And I did that after you and I had a phone conversation that you were kind enough to set up with me to talk about your findings, correct?
Yes.
And let's go to the bottom. We discussed only one report during that. I'm an idiot when it comes to these things. We discussed just Lavon's report, but you also, I sent to you all the other reports too, correct?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm confirming our conversation in this email, correct?
Yes.
And in confirming that, where I say right here, finally, when I ask you if it was possible to put a lighter to a baby's leg and ignite that baby to where the flames are waist high, you indicated, what did you say? Can you read that for me?
I never tried it. I don't know.
And then I ask you if any of the above, where we summarize Dr. Lavon's report, I said, if anything, if I misstated anything in my confirming email, please let me know of any corrections, correct?
Yes.
And you responded pretty quickly. We'll see it in 1 minute. Let me see that time. Again, same date. This was at 3:22, or 32, I apologize, 32, right? This is your response to my confirmation of what we discussed, correct?
Clear.
Correct.
Now, the only thing that you corrected was that regarding statement number 2, you identified multiple fractures, correct?
Yes.
That's the only thing. You did not correct, going back to my original confirmation, that you said, I never tried it, meaning putting a lighter to a baby's leg and having the baby combust and have flames up to her chest. You did say, I never tried it, I don't know, didn't you?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm done with that. Thank you. Doctor, based on your medical background, you'd agree that a baby is 75 to 80% water, wouldn't you? Yes or no?
Yes.
And would you agree that trying to light a baby on fire with a lighter, that would be similar to trying to light a wet toilet paper roll on fire? Do you agree with that?
I don't know.
Doctor, are you saying that based on that interview, you think that Skylar tried to light her baby on fire? Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Do you know how many BTUs are in a flame of a lighter?
No.
Do you know how many BTUs it takes to burn a human body?
No.
Have you ever heard of warnings from any governmental agency or anywhere that tells you when lighting the barbecue, for a barbecue, watch out, you may combust into flames? Have you ever heard of a warning like that?
No.
I raised 2 children. We had fireplaces, we had fires outside. I don't remember ever telling my children, be careful, don't get too close to the fire because they're going to combust.
Your Honor,
Just because.
objection, I'm not sure if there's a question here or just a statement from me.
Go ahead, finish your question.
Thank you. Would you agree that that's silly? We don't just combust. Isn't that silly? Yes or no?
We do not combust.
And when I say combust, we're talking about putting like a little lighter to a baby's foot or leg and they just all of a sudden burst into flames. That doesn't make sense, does it? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you. Let me see that. Yeah.
Defense Exhibit YY.
We're looking now at Defendant's Exhibit YY. That's the very back of the yard along the tree line where eventually Skylar pointed out to the police that were there where her baby was buried. You never saw that photo in your determining what your opinion was?
No.
Let's go. Doctor, this is Exhibit DDD, Defense Exhibit DDD. That's a picture we learned earlier from either Dr. Updegrove or one of the deputies. That's the gravesite. You ever see that?
No.
Didn't think it was important to look at it?
I had a report from the Warren County coroner as to the scene that he went to. I did not see a picture.
Well, wouldn't it have helped to look at that picture to see if there was any ashes or anything that would show that that baby was lit on fire and had flames up to its chest? Wouldn't that be kind of important for you as a forensic anthropologist? Wouldn't that be important?
I'm
Yes
a
or no?
pathologist, but I did not receive reports that they had seen information
Well,
to
Doctor-
show that.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Did you finish your answer?
Yes.
Doctor, you work with police and prosecutors It's part of your job, do you not?
Yes,
And if you need more information, you ask for it, don't you?
yes.
And, by the way, you don't do any moonlighting, do you? You don't, like if somebody who is defending somebody wrongfully accused and asks you to render opinion, you don't do that, do you?
I do not do that.
So your job is to, as you said earlier, determine causes of death, manner of death, and you only work with prosecutors and police officers, correct? Yes or no?
Well, I will appear in court by subpoena with whoever subpoenas me, defense or prosecutor.
So the answer to my question is what? Do you work only with police officers and prosecutors?
Objection, Your Honor, she just answered the question.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer if you can.
If I receive a subpoena from the defense, I will respond to the defense just as I talked with the defense on the telephone when he requested that we talk.
Maybe I'm not stating my question correctly. What I'm getting to here, Dr. Brown, is that in doing your job with the Montgomery County Coroner's Office as a pathologist, you work with prosecutors and with police officers. Yes or no?
Yes,
And in filling this vacuum that you told us all about, you didn't think it was necessary to look at scene photographs? No? You didn't think it was necessary?
in terms of the scene, I had a report from the Warren County Coroner, and they did not take any scene photographs. So I did not see any scene photographs.
You didn't ask the police for the photographs that they took?
I did not.
Have you ever been around a campfire?
Yes,
Did you ever build a campfire?
probably not.
Did you ever clear bushes under trees and then burn them where the little leaves and branches? You ever done that?
No,
Would you agree that when you burn something and it's on the ground, that it leaves a mark showing the burn area? Would you agree with that?
I don't know what kind of mark it's going to leave.
Don't you think that's kind of important when you claim that you believe Skylar burned her baby and the flames came up to her chest? Don't you think that's important? Yes or no?
The important information I did gather from the Warren County Coroner who went to the scene and did the recovery.
So you didn't fill this vacuum with any pictures or reports from the police, did you?
A report, a verbal report, not a picture.
A verbal report from who?
The Warren County Coroner who went to the
Dr.
scene.
Updegrove.
Yes.
Yeah. And he didn't report seeing any burning, did
No,
he? And doctor, looking at this picture that was taken by the police, Defendant's Exhibit DDD, that's the gravesite. Do you see any evidence of any burning whatsoever?
no.
You don't know. You're telling this jury you believe she burned her baby, but you don't know whether it would leave any kind of evidence in the ground. Is that what you're telling us?
I'm telling you that based on the police interview, her statement was that she attempted to cremate her baby.
But based on that interview, you didn't want to develop it any further. You didn't want to support your decision that you thought that maybe she burned her baby, correct? You didn't ask for any photos of the scene to show any burn marks? that would verify that this actually happened?
Again, I had a verbal report from Dr. Updegrove, the Warren County coroner, who went to the scene.
I didn't ask that question.
I did not see any photographs.
I asked you, don't you think, as a forensic anthropologist, that comes in here and tells this jury that this child burned her baby,
Objection, Your Honor.
don't you think it's kind of important to at least find some evidence of that? Yes or no?
It is important, and my evidence was based on her interview.
Without anything supporting that. And you don't even know that a human being can be lit on fire with a lighter. You think that's possible?
I think it's possible that you can have your hair catch on fire.
That wasn't the report. That wasn't what she said. That wasn't what she said in her interview. You didn't see where she said, oh, I took a lighter and burned her hair, did you?
What she said was, I tried to cremate my baby.
We'll let the jury decide when they see this interview.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. The jury will disregard that remark.
Let's go to your reported history of a live birth. You watched all 8 hours of the interrogations, correct?
Yes.
And in the process of coming to your opinions, you knew that Skylar was still in high school and she had just turned 18 when she gave birth to a stillborn baby. You were aware of that? Yes or no? Were you aware of it?
I am not aware that the baby was stillborn. Yes, I am aware of the other facts.
Well, you're aware, in addition to the age of Skylar, and you're aware that she just turned 18, and I take it from the interrogation, you're aware that they took her in to a 6x8 windowless room to talk about this tragic event. You're aware of that, are you not?
Sustained. The jury will disregard that question.
Are you aware, let me rephrase it. You're aware that they put her in a 6x8 interrogation room, correct?
I don't know the dimensions of the room.
And you're aware that it was windowless, right?
I don't know if there's a window in the room.
Okay. We're still on the topic of evidence of a live birth. In watching these interviews, did you pay any attention to the fact that Skylar said that she did not cut the umbilical cord?
Yes.
You did. What did you paid attention to that? When a baby comes out and its umbilical cord is not attached, what does that mean, doctor?
Not attached.
Not attached. You don't have to cut it. What does that mean to you?
An umbilical cord not being attached would mean at some point it broke.
Would the baby die as a result of not getting oxygen and nutrients from that umbilical cord?
A baby can die in those circumstances.
You realize surprised that in watching the interrogation, that the detectives didn't follow up on any of that, did they? Did they?
They asked her several times about the umbilical cord.
Was that because they were surprised that she didn't cut it?
I do not know why they asked certain questions and
Let me
did
ask
not
you-
ask other questions.
Let me ask you this. Did they appear surprised when they went back to that subject? You didn't cut the umbilical cord?
I don't know that they were surprised.
Doctor, this may be out of your expertise, but I would think that you'd fill the vacuum with this. When a woman, a pregnant woman or a pregnant girl, is in their third trimester and they're bleeding, does that say anything to you? Do you have any knowledge of what that means?
I would go see a doctor.
So you don't think that that could be a sign of any kind of placenta issue?
I would go see an OBGYN.
I didn't ask that question, doctor. I know you're trying to help the prosecution.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I'd like for you to
Question, Mr.
answer my
Richardson.
question.
I'm not an OBGYN. I would go see an OBGYN.
I didn't ask that question. I asked you about your knowledge. You know what a placenta abruption means, don't you, doctor?
Yes,
You want to tell the jury, isn't that where the placenta pulls away from the uterine wall?
yes,
Do you remember in your review of these interrogations, do you remember Skylar telling them, meaning the interrogators, that she was spotting on April 3rd?
no,
No. Did you, I don't see it in your report, did you look at Hilltop, her obstetrician's records in coming to your opinion?
yes, I saw medical records.
You didn't put that in your report. I don't see that in your report. Here, let me put it back up here. I just asked you, I think at the beginning of my cross-examination, everything that you had reviewed in order to come to your conclusion, didn't I?
Yes,
And up here is your report, right?
yes,
And I don't know if let me see if I can. Can you all see it? Doctor, this is your report, and this is what you relied upon, correct?
yes,
Yes or no? A nearly complete set of skeletal remains, yes?
yes,
A 30 to 40 week gestation based on Dr. Murray's examination, not yours, correct?
38 to 40,
Yep. Female gender, that's based on the Miami Valley Crime Lab, right?
yes,
Reported history from police interview of live birth.
yes,
Reported scene history of recovery of the remains from the backyard burial. Yes?
yes,
Reported history from police interview of attempted incineration of the infant. That is what you based your report on, correct?
yes.
So where does it say up there that you reviewed or based your report on the Hilltop records, Dr. Andrews and Dr. Boyce?
It is not listed on the front page of my report. I did review records that were provided to me and did not have anything from those records to include in my report.
Doctor, are those records in your file?
No, we did not create the records in our office. The records were created in a different medical office. We are not the holder of those records.
So you reviewed them and then sent them somewhere, or what? I don't understand.
They are disposed of. They are shredded. They are not a part of our record.
Where'd you get those records from?
I believe the Warren County coroner.
You think that the Dr. Updegrove went and got those records?
I don't recall. I believe that's where I got them.
Did you get those records before or after your report dated September 19th?
Before.
Well, in reviewing those records, you saw Dr. Andrews' chart. Chart is another word for record. You saw his chart where he indicated that on April 26th, she had a fundal height. You know what a fundal height is, don't you?
Yes.
Where he, Dr. Andrew, measured her at being 32 weeks pregnant.
Yes.
You remember that from the report?
Yes.
Do you also remember from that report that she reported her last menses, her last period, was April 3rd? Remember that?
I don't recall that.
Does what is it?
And that's his April 3rd.
Yeah. Thank you. This is part of Dr. Is that it?
This is Dr. Andrew.
And this one where
LNP April 3rd, last month.
thank you. History of present illness. This 18-year-old Caucasian white male whose LNP was on April 3rd, 2017. Remember reading that? Part of the report.
I'm sure I read it.
That come into any of your considerations?
Yes, I considered it, and I read the report.
She already said she's. So, you said you considered it? Is that what I
Yes.
heard you say? Yes?
Yes.
And you know that, oh, by the way, did you talk to Dr. Andrew?
No.
Did you talk to Randy Carter or the prosecutors about Dr. Andrew telling Skylar that she could expect to deliver a baby within 10 weeks?
No.
You're aware that Skylar gave birth to a stillborn
Objection,
on
Your
April?
Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead, continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. On May 7th, correct?
I'm aware that she delivered on May 7th, according to police interview.
In the middle of the night. Do you know, or did you bother to count from April 26th to May 7th? That is only 11 days, correct?
Yes.
And according to all of the anthropologists, forensic anthropologists, that fetus was full term, correct?
Yes, that's what they say.
Yeah. So, would you agree, based on that there may have been some type of growth restriction with Skylar's baby?
I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, in your 10 years of experience, are you aware that having an unexpected delivery at home increases the likelihood of a stillborn? Yes or no?
Yes.
Based on your experience, would you agree that if Annabelle was growth restricted, that it increases the likelihood of a stillbirth? Yes or no?
I do not know that she was growth restricted, but if that is the case, yes.
Thank you. Were you aware, in filling this vacuum that you talked about when Ms. Kraft was talking to you, did you look at Skylar's records regarding her eating disorder?
No.
Would you agree that a person who has an eating disorder, a woman or a child, who has an eating disorder also increases the likelihood of a stillbirth?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you talk or have anybody on your behalf talk to Skylar's mom and dad about the problems they were having with her eating disorder?
No.
Doctor, again, I have to go back to the fact that you're talking about this vacuum. You didn't look at any of those things, but you brought in a forensic anthropologist to help you, right?
Yes.
Did you ask for an opinion from an obstetrician, gynecologist, as to the facts as you knew them then? Did you ask for a consult from an obstetrician?
No.
Didn't think it was important, did you? You didn't think it was important, did you?
It wasn't important in terms of the autopsy.
Autopsy being putting the bones together, you didn't do anything else, did you? Did you? Did you do anything else other than make a skeletal remains for pictures?
I did as much of an autopsy as I could given what was presented to me.
Well, tell us what you did with those bones. Tell us what you did.
Because I was unable to examine the baby at death, I did what I could with skeletal remains, examining the bones, and then also reviewed the information as provided from the scene and also from the police interview, as well as the anthropologist.
So that's part of the autopsy, is not only the examination, but all this extraneous stuff. Is that correct?
It's part of determining the cause and manner of death.
I didn't ask that. I asked you if the autopsy, as you use that word, does that include more than just examining the remains of Annabelle?
The autopsy is just my exam.
Thank you. Doctor, we now know you didn't get an OB, an obstetrician's consult. But let me ask you this, in reviewing these interrogations, did you think it was kind of strange when Skylar, for the first time, was describing this birth of a stillborn, that a water didn't break? Was that Did that come into your consideration? Yes or no?
I'm unaware of whether or not her water broke.
Yeah. But we're talking about her interview. When she was asked, did your water break? And she said no. Did that come into your thought process at all?
I don't recall that
Of course you
statement.
do. Did it come into your evaluation when she said in that initial interview that the baby wasn't breathing, that the baby didn't have a heartbeat, that the baby was white? Did that come into your consideration?
Yes, it did.
When a baby isn't breathing and the baby is white, meaning it doesn't have oxygen, and we already talked about the umbilical cord being separated, isn't that a description of a stillbirth? Yes or no?
Yes.
Doctor, when a woman or a girl delivers a baby and they don't feel water breaking or anything like that, might that be some sign of a problem with the amniotic fluid around the baby? Would you agree with that?
That's possible.
And when you don't have sufficient amniotic fluid, would you agree that that can cause problems with the umbilical cord?
It can cause problems.
What about Skylar saying she just got on the toilet and the baby came out pretty easily? Does that tell you anything? Does it tell you that maybe that baby was growth restricted? Yes or no?
No.
Doctor, are you familiar with confirmation bias?
No.
You don't know what that means?
No.
Huh. Well, if I were to tell you that confirmation bias is where you come up with some idea and you only look at the facts that support that idea and ignoring facts that don't support that idea, okay?
Okay.
Would you agree, based on what I just told you confirmation bias is that you ignored a ton of facts that would indicate that this baby was stillborn?
I did not ignore facts.
No?
No.
You didn't get an OB consult. You didn't pay attention to the fact that Skylar was bleeding on April 3rd. Right? Yes or no?
No, I was not aware of
At
that.
this point, we've
Mr.
asked him to
Richardson, it
answer
does
these
seem like
questions.
we have been over this ground once before. Let's
I
move on.
apologize, Judge. I may have 1 second, Judge.
Okay.
I have no further questions of this witness.
Okay.
You still have water up there, Doctor?
I do.
Okay. I don't want to talk to you about ifs, okay? I want to talk to you about what we actually know in this case. Now, let's clear up a couple housekeeping things. Are you employed by the prosecutor's office?
No.
Are you employed by the Warren County Sheriff's Office?
No.
Are you employed by any police agency?
No.
Are you employed by Montgomery County Coroner's Office?
Yes.
And as part of your employment duties, do you perform autopsies on anybody that comes that comes to your attention that meets the requirement for an autopsy?
Yes.
When you come to court, is that by way of subpoena?
Yes.
Subpoenas issued by the state?
Yes.
Subpoenas issued by the defense?
Yes.
They're all the same.
Yes.
You get a subpoena and you come.
That's right.
If the defense issues you a subpoena in this case, are you coming to court?
Yes.
Ms. Kraft, haven't we also been over this ground as well?
Your Honor, he indicated that she's only here as part of her relationship with the state.
Let's move on.
Mr. Rickers wanted to go through the emails that occurred between yourself and Dr. Murray and Mr. Knippen, correct?
Yes.
You would agree those emails were initiated by Dr. Murray, not yourself.
Yes.
And he wanted to then switch from that over to the emails between Dr. Murray and Mr. Knippen. You were not a part of those emails, correct?
Correct.
And he shows you one sentence out of that email, and it indicates that the state, based on Dr. Murray's changed opinion, was in fact asking for an addendum.
Correct.
We weren't hiding anything. If it is now your opinion that you do not believe that there is evidence to suggest that the bones were burned, I will need you to do an addendum to your report with this additional information so that it can be provided to defense counsel. And then we, because that addendum was not forthcoming, retained Dr. Latham. So we did go get a second opinion,
Yes.
and you're aware of that.
Yes.
Mr. Rickers wants to ask you about everybody's opinions. When you come here under subpoena by either side and you are asked to give an opinion, are you giving everybody's opinions, doctor, or are you giving your opinion?
I'm giving my opinion.
You look at everything else, correct?
Yes, I look at everything and I'm taking it into consideration, but ultimately, when I'm sitting here, it is my opinion.
You are a forensic pathologist,
Yes.
not a forensic anthropologist.
Correct.
Based on what you are able to do within your area of expertise, were you able to make a determination of pre- or post-mortem injury to the skull?
No.
And did you in fact indicate that?
Yes.
Have you ever said anything to the contrary?
No.
Did you take into account, when reaching your opinion in this case, the fractures to the skull?
I took it into account, and my opinion still stands. Whether they are before death or after death, my opinion still stands.
You believe, even if those injuries to that skull are post-mortem, this child still died as a result of homicidal violence?
Correct.
The burn injury, the thermal injury, and I want to make sure, because we keep talking about the baby.
Objection. Did she say burn injury? Is that what you said?
I think she was in the process of rephrasing her.
I apologize.
Go ahead.
I want to be careful because we keep kind of using this global reference. When we are talking about burn injury in the context of your testimony, we are talking about thermal injury to the bones. Would you agree?
Yes.
Because that's all you had were the bones.
Correct.
You had no tissue, no
Correct.
organs, any skin?
No, one piece of fatty tissue that was about 2 inches, about 2 by 2 inches.
From the skeletal remains, all we have left of baby Richardson, in making your determination of homicidal violence, does it ultimately matter to you if her body was burned post-mortem?
No,
And do you have any reason to believe it was burned prior to her death?
I don't have any evidence to show that.
And you're trying to find out what led up to the death, correct?
Correct,
Not what happened after the death.
correct.
So are you able to reach your opinion and make your determination on cause of death in this case separate and apart from whether or not there was a post-death burning of baby Richardson's body?
Yes,
Mr. Rickers wants to talk to you about the information that Miss Richardson, an adult, she's there by herself without a parent because she's an adult, provided to her doctor. And he points out she's got bleeding on April 3rd of 2017, correct? You see that?
her last period,
That's what she reported to her doctor.
correct.
She's also there requesting birth control, correct?
Yes,
Does it anywhere in there indicate that she's pregnant?
no,
Anywhere in there that she told her doctor, I think I'm pregnant, I'm here for a pregnancy test?
no,
But she's reporting her last period, and if we keep going with that, she's also telling her doctor, I'm having regular periods.
yes,
So that's the information when she goes to the doctor on April 26th that she chooses to report to her doctor.
yes, that's what it looks like.
I'm here, I want birth control, I'm having a regular period, I don't want a pelvic exam, and I'm not telling you that I'm pregnant, or that I have reason to believe I'm pregnant.
Correct.
She didn't share any of that information, did she?
Overruled.
Yeah, may we approach for 1 second?
You may. Go ahead and rephrase your question, Ms. Crown.
Your Honor, if I may have a moment.
You may.
Doctor, you would agree that looking at the record that the defense presented to you, it indicates that her last menstrual period was April 3rd, 2017, that she was having currently regular menses.
Yes,
The defense then wanted to go through audio portions that were selected out. Just one line about no burning.
yes.
What fire?
Correct.
I didn't burn her. Statements that she made to the police.
Yes.
You had an opportunity to watch those interviews, correct?
Yes.
And read the transcript.
Yes.
So do you recall in the July 20th interview, either hearing it when you watched the interview or when you reading it when you read the transcript, not pursuant to any questioning by the police, when her father first comes into the room and says, "Honey, tell us what's going on." The police said, "You have to tell us because you're 18. And the first thing she utters to her father is, "I tried to cremate the baby."
Yes.
That wasn't pursuant to any question asked by any police officer. That was her voluntary statement provided to her father.
Correct.
You were also asked questions as if they were absolutes, and I'll stick with that interview first, about the cord not being attached.
Correct.
Do you recall in the second interview, Detective Carter saying, "Was it still attached to the placenta? Do you remember?" And Skylar says, "No." And Detective Carter says, "Okay." And then Skylar says, "I don't remember. It might have been."
Correct.
Is that a definitive it wasn't attached to anything?
No.
That was her saying, "I don't know."
Correct.
So if we don't know, based on her statement, as to whether the cord was or was not attached, can you assume from that that the cord was not attached?
I did not assume that, no.
Likewise, you were asked if her water never broke, or if there was very little, can you assume that there were issues, again, with the placenta or the amount of amniotic fluid? And I would ask you, I would direct your attention to the first interview, when she's with Lieutenant Fain. And he asks her, "Have you ever heard of the term when people say their water broke?" And Skylar says, "Yeah, I don't know. Did you feel that? I don't know." Is there anything definitive about that indicating that her water never broke?
No.
Or indicating low amniotic fluid?
No.
From either of those statements that there was a cord not attached or water never broke, based on what she actually said, not if she said that, what she actually said, can you assume that that child was stillborn?
No.
In either transcript, because again, I don't want to deal with ifs, I want to deal with what we know. Did you ever read any statement or description from the defendant where she said her daughter burst into flames, quote unquote, burst into flames?
No.
Are you able to make any determination on the amount of burn injury to baby Richardson based on what you had to examine?
No.
Was there any testable evidence that had not been destroyed? Was there
No.
any evidence brought to your lab that could be tested, or is everything that you would have needed to make a determination on the amount of burn injury to that baby destroyed?
Yes, prior to it arriving at our office.
Mr. Ritger's started out his questioning of you asking if, based on the skeletal remains, what you had to test on that day, those 2 dates. He said you cannot say if there was any injury prior to death. You recall him saying that to you?
Yes,
Based on what you had left of baby Richardson, you've said undetermined etiology, correct?
yes,
Based on what you had left of baby Richardson, doctor, can you offer an opinion as to whether or not she was suffocated?
no,
Based on the bones that you have, would there be any evidence of suffocation?
no,
Doctor, based on what we have of baby Richardson, can you make any determination as to whether or not she was drowned?
no,
Would any evidence of drowning still show up on the bones?
no.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Richters, recross? Sure.
Doctor, decomposition occurs when the baby or any human being is buried in the ground. Is that correct?
Yes,
So that's not necessarily a sign of anybody destroying anything. It's a natural process, isn't it? Is decomposition a natural process? Yes or no?
yes,
When you first took the stand and were questioned by Ms. Kraft, she made it a point, and you totally agreed, that you can't decide this case or any other case in a vacuum. Correct?
correct.
And so when she got back up here and talked about everybody else's opinion, wouldn't you think that Dr. Latham, who's hired by the prosecutor, wouldn't you think that that report is very important as to those fractures? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Sure,
And yet, it's nowhere in any report of yours, is it? You just want to let it linger for the jury that maybe those fractures occurred sometime before what you think was a death, as opposed to after the baby was buried in the ground, correct? That's what your report says. You don't know before or after.
my report says I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Ms. Kraft, when she came back up here to ask a few other questions of you, and she referred to Dr. Andrew, did you in any way, were you aware that Dr. Andrew came in here and said that when he told Skylar that she was pregnant, that her reaction was one of surprise? Were you told that?
I was not told that.
You know that it was kind of important. No, strike that. I heard you say when Ms. Kraft came back up here that your determination was based on everything that occurred before Annabelle was stillborn on May 7th. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
But you didn't have everything, did you? You did not have everything when you made that consideration. Yes or no?
I'm not sure that I understand your
Okay,
question.
that's fair. That's fair. Well, you didn't get an OB consult, an obstetrician. You didn't ask an OB about what they saw in the medical records, and then you have a full-term baby 11 days later, did you?
I did not talk to her OB or get an OB consult.
And that you didn't think anything of the bleeding that Skylar reported when she first went to the OB on April 26th, did you? Didn't.
No.
And in your review of these interrogations, isn't it true that Skylar was asked multiple times as to whether or not she cut the cord, and she said no? Is that true?
Yes.
May I have 1 second?
You may.
A couple more things, Dr. Brown. When you were asked some questions by Ms. Kraft about tissues and stuff, there was hair that was found at the scene, correct?
Yes.
And some tissue that you had already talked about, correct?
Yes.
And there wasn't any indication of burning on those pieces of evidence, was there?
No.
And Doctor, you didn't talk, or you weren't aware of any interviews with Skylar's mother regarding finding any bloody Tampax or pads in the upstairs trash? You're not aware of that, are you?
No.
And finding those before the stillborn was born on May 7th, correct? You you don't know anything about that,
I
do you?
don't. No, I don't.
Yeah. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Doctor. You can step down. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are going to go ahead and get at least a little bit of our next witness in. Mr. Knippen, Ms. Kraft, are we ready for our next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Call Dr. Latham.
The plan is to break for lunch, ladies and gentlemen, in about a half an hour.
Raise your right hand for me. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in these proceedings to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Sit up close and speak into this microphone, please. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Doctor, would you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Yes, it's Dr. Christa Latham, Latham,
Doctor, where are you employed?
at the University of Indianapolis.
What is your position there?
I am an associate professor of biology and anthropology. I'm also the director of the University of Indianapolis Human Identification Center
How long have you been employed there?
since 2007.
What do your duties consist of?
I teach graduate and undergraduate classes in human biology, human anatomy, and human genetics. I also oversee the forensic casework that is analyzed through the Human Identification Center.
Would you go over with the jury your educational background that qualifies you for your position?
Okay. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Chemistry, and I graduated cum laude with honors. My first master's degree is a Master of Science in Human Biology. I also have a master's degree in anthropology and a PhD in anthropology, And throughout my educational experience, I was taught and mentored by board-certified forensic anthropologists.
Doctor, do you have any research, like a research specialty?
Yes, I am a forensic and molecular anthropologist, and that means that I study humans at the DNA and the skeletal level. So I study human skeletons and human DNA. My research focuses specifically on aspects of human identification, and it's been published in journals and books, as well as presented at scientific meetings.
Okay. Do you belong to any belong to any professional memberships?
Yes, I am a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I'm also a member of many other organizations like the International Association for Identification, the American Society of Human Genetics. I've been presenting my research for over 15 years at these meetings and have about 100 presentations at formal scientific meetings.
And doctor, do you have a curriculum vitae detailing your experience?
Yes.
I want to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 111. You can take a look at that and tell me whether you recognize what you're looking at.
Yes.
And what is that in State's Exhibit 111, please?
This is my CV that I provided to you that outlines my educational experience, my employment, research, publications, presentations, lectures.
Could you explain to the jury what is forensic anthropology?
A forensic anthropologist is someone who specializes in the recovery and analysis of human skeletons. So we assist coroners, law enforcement, and pathologists in the identification of people from their bones. We also look at the bones to see if there's any evidence of trauma that may have contributed to the death of the individual.
What types of things can you tell from bones?
We derive basic information about who that person was in life. So things like their age at death, how tall they were, whether they were male or female, what their ancestry is. The amount of information that we can obtain from the bones depends on whether or not that individual was an infant or a child or an adult. It also depends on the condition of the remains, so how much we have to analyze. We can look at the bones to see if there's any diseases that are evident in the bones. And like I said before, we also look to see if there's any trauma that may have contributed to the death of the individual.
How many cases do you estimate you've either handled or assisted on over your time?
Oh, hundreds of cases across the Midwestern United States and the Southern United States.
And have you testified in court before?
Yes, I have, in both federal and state court.
And which courts have you testified in?
I've testified in the states of Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Delaware.
Approximately how many times do you think you've testified?
16.
And have you been qualified as an expert in each of those times that you have testified?
Yes, I have.
And is that as an expert in forensic anthropology?
Yes.
And are you certified in the field of forensic anthropology?
I am. I'm a board-certified forensic anthropologist. We are called diplomates of the American Board of Forensic Anthropology. It's the highest achievement in the field, and it reflects high-quality research and casework, as well as a rigorous examination. There's currently only about 100 practicing forensic anthropologists in the world.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer Dr. Latham as an expert in the field of forensic anthropology.
Does the defense wish to inquire?
No, Your Honor, we agree.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Doctor, in this case, State of Ohio versus Brooke Richardson, were you contacted by the State of Ohio to consult as an expert regarding skeletal remains that have been recovered?
Yes, you contacted me in September of 2017.
And what specifically were you requested to do, Doctor?
I was asked to analyze infant skeletal remains in order to assess the age at death and to look for any trauma that may have contributed to the death of the individual.
And I want to direct your attention to September 20th of 2017, where the skeletal remains of baby Richardson transferred to the University of Indianapolis Human Identification Center for you to conduct your scientific analysis.
Yes, they were transferred to the University of Indianapolis Human Identification Center by the Warren County Sheriff's Office.
And what did you do when you first received the remains?
First thing I did was inventory which bones were available for analysis.
Why is that important, Doctor?
Well, it's important to be able to determine the completeness of the skeleton in order to know what can be done in later analysis. It's also important to document all the different bones that were transferred to me for chain of custody purposes.
And Doctor, for purposes of your testimony today, did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation that kind of outlines some of the stuff and the topics that you're going to go over with the jury?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 112. You can take a look at that and tell me whether you recognize what you're looking at.
Yes, this is the PowerPoint that I prepared.
Is that a fair and accurate copy of the PowerPoint that you prepared?
Yes.
You indicated that the first thing that you did was you took an inventory of the bones. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I want to place on the screen page 1 of State's Exhibit 112. Could you tell the jurors, what are we looking at in this photograph, please, Doctor?
So the photograph is just all of the skeletal elements, all of the bones that I had available for analysis. And these first few slides, which are printed out at this point in time, are going to just demonstrate which elements I did not have to analyze.
And is there anything being identified in this particular slide that indicates what you did not have to analyze?
Yes, so the first slide, is there a
You
central
actually
pointer?
can use your finger on the screen. It
Okay.
will actually show up on the big screen.
Okay, so when I had put this up as a PowerPoint, I had this first thing here highlighted to show that we're missing 3 ribs. And I have this arrow here just to demonstrate to you that the ribs are those U-shaped bones that you see in the figure there. Okay.
And then I believe if you touch the bottom right-hand corner,
Bottom left will clear everything, and the bottom right will clear the last thing that you
Okay.
did.
All right.
so one of the first things that we're missing is 3 ribs. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay. Putting page 2 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen, what are we looking at in this slide, please?
Okay, so this, what was bold in the PowerPoint was that we're missing 4 vertebral arches. So here, if you look at this portion of the image, those are the bones that make up the back. So that's your spinal column. And what I'm referring to are the little portions that look like parentheses here on the sides of those circles. There's 4 of those that we're missing for analysis.
Putting page 3 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen. What are we looking at on this slide?
So here, what is bold is that we're missing 3 vertebral bodies, and that's again referring to those bones in the back. And it's the little circles that are in between the parentheses. So that's what we're referring to is missing 3 of those little circles that are located there.
Putting page 4 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen. What are we looking at on this slide, Doctor?
Okay. Where it says that we are missing 8 manual phalanges, that's just referring to 8 finger bones that we're missing for analysis.
Putting page 5 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen.
Okay.
What are we looking at on this slide, Doctor?
So here it says that we're missing the left tibia and fibula. And if you look at where this circle is here, that's just indicating that we are missing those lower leg bones. You see what they're supposed to look like on the opposite side over here, but we were missing both of those bones from the left side.
putting page 6 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen. What are we looking at with this slide?
And here, it's just showing that we are missing all the bones of the ankle and the feet. So where these circles are on the figure, that's where we would have had those bones located, but those were not provided to me for analysis.
Other than the bones that you just went through with the jury, other than that, was it a complete set of the skeletal remains?
Yes, it was.
Okay. After you take an inventory of the bones, what do you do next?
In this particular case, well, what I would usually do would be to remove any soft tissues that are adhering to the bones so that I can visually observe all the bone surfaces. However, in this particular case, I was not granted permission to do so due to a court order. There were additional experts that were going to look at the remains after me, so I had to skip that step in this particular case.
Okay. Do you have a slide, though, that indicates some of that soft tissue that you're talking about as it was found on the bone?
Yes.
I'm going to put page 7 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen. What are we looking at in this slide, Doctor?
Okay, so this is the same figure that you saw before, just showing all of the remains that were available to me for analysis. And it's mostly skeletonized, so it's mostly bare bone. But there were some soft tissues that were on some of the bone surfaces, and it was especially noticeable on the bones of the head. So I have some areas circled here on some of those bones that are showing the soft tissues that were still in place. So approximately 3 to 5% of the skeleton was covered with those tissues, so I wasn't able to analyze those surfaces.
And what was your next step in the process, Doctor?
The next thing I did in this case was to assess age at death.
Okay. And could you talk to the jurors a little bit about the way that you're able to make that determination?
For an individual that was this young, we do use a couple different techniques in order to assess age at death. So we took some bone measurements in order to see how the size of this infant was developing, what that was compared with in terms of growth and development of infants. We also looked at some developmental shape changes that occur in the bones as an individual grows and develops. And then finally, we looked at dental development, so how the teeth were developing.
Let's talk first about the bone measurements. Do you have a slide related to the bone measurements that you performed in this case?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to put page 8 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen.
Okay.
If you could go over with the jury, what are we looking at on page 8 of State's Exhibit 112?
This was just a way for me to visually represent the bones that were measured, as well as the age that was determined from those bone measurements. So as you can see, all of the bones that were measured were consistent with an age of 38 to 40 weeks. So if we start here where it says left humerus, what we're looking at is the upper arm bone here. So it would be this part of the body that was measured and analyzed. With the left scapula, what that's referring to is this bone here, which most people refer to as their shoulder blade. So when that bone was measured, it was consistent with 38 to 40 weeks of age. The left clavicle, that's this bone here. That's your collarbone. When that bone was measured, it was consistent with 38 to 40 weeks of age. The left ulna and radius, that's just referring to these bones of the lower arm here. When those bones were measured, they were both consistent with 38 to 40 weeks of age. These next three, where it says left ilium, left ischium, and left pubis, that's referring to the bones of the pelvis. The bones that we recognize in an adult actually grow in different pieces and then fuse together. So by measuring those pieces separately, they all came back as consistent with 38 to 40 weeks of age. The left femur, That is the bone of the upper leg. When that was measured, it was consistent with 38 to 40 weeks of age. And then finally, because the bones were missing on the left side, I looked at the right tibia and fibula. Those are the bones, the two long bones in the lower leg. And when those were measured, it was consistent with 38 to 40 weeks of age.
So all of the bone measurements that you took all place this child being within the 38 to 40 week range?
That's correct.
And after the bone measurements, what did you do next?
The next thing I looked at were just some developmental changes in bone shape, and then how those different bones fuse together as an individual grows and develops. And I do have an example that I put onto the next slide to demonstrate that.
I'm going to put page 9 of State's Exhibit 112 on the screen. If you could explain to the jury, what are we looking at with this slide, Doctor?
Yeah, so the bone here that's being used as the example, it's called the temporal bone. And you have temporal bones on either side of your skull. So your skull as an adult will be fused together. These are loose bones in a developing individual. And this particular bone develops in 3 main pieces. Here, there's a ring here that we call the tympanic portion of the bone. And that usually fuses to this flat portion of the bone here by 35 weeks of development. And those two elements were fused together in this individual. If we look at the other figure, here it's showing the other side of the bone. So the tympanic ring is fused to this flat portion, and that in turn is fused to this third portion of the bone down here. And that doesn't usually occur until around the birth of the individual, up until the first year after life. So that's showing examples of the developmental stages when we look at how those bones grow and fuse.
And then in addition to doing that type of analysis, was there one additional type of analysis that you performed?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, I also looked at dental development, and I did prepare another figure to illustrate that as well.
I'm going to put page 10 on the screen of State's Exhibit 112. You could explain to the jury, what are we viewing on this slide, Doctor?
Okay, so when we look at the development of the dentition, and for example, what I have here are the crowns of the first molars. When we see that the development is consistent with an age of birth plus or minus 2 months. So that means that in a large comparison sample of infants, this developmental stage would be consistent with most individuals at the time of birth, but there is that error range of plus or minus 8 weeks as well. So dental development is consistent with birth plus or minus 8 weeks.
So when you looked at all of these factors when taken together, the long bone measurements, the qualitative development, and the dental development, were you able to reach a conclusion with respect to the estimated age of the child at the time of death?
Yes, I was, and I have a slide that kind of summarizes that as well.
Putting page 11 on the screen. What are we looking at in this slide, Doctor?
Yes, so because there is variation in how individuals develop, you have to look at multiple approaches in order to get an idea of an individual's age at death. And when we take all of the long bone measurements into consideration, when we looked at all of the development of the bones in terms of shape and fusion, when we looked at the dental development, all of those place this individual at full term. Now, keep in mind that the medical literature varies in how they define full term, but most of the literature puts that at between 37 and 40 weeks, and that's what we're seeing with the development here of the skeleton.
And doctor, is that opinion that this was a full-term child of 37 to 40 weeks, is that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
The determination that the individual was approximately full term is based on comparison to thousands of infants in many global populations. So there is a high degree of scientific certainty in terms of that determination.
In addition to estimating the age of the child, were you also asked to examine the remains for any indications of trauma?
Yes, I was.
And what did you declude?
I think before we leave the area of age and move on to trauma, probably be a good time to break for lunch. You may. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think the attorneys are telling me based on the anticipated time of the questioning for this witness that we're going to press on. So we'll look to maybe break a little bit later than I originally anticipated. Mr. Knippen, you may continue.
Thank you. Doctor, I believe I was asking you, were you also asked to examine the remains for any signs of trauma that you may have seen?
Yes, I was.
And what did you conclude?
I didn't find any trauma that could have contributed to the death of the individual. I did see some alteration to the bone, but all of it was considered post-mortem, which means it would have occurred after the death of the individual.
And there was some testimony in here previously from the coroner. She noted that there were different fractures to some of the skull bones. Do you remember seeing those?
Yes.
But I want to make sure that I understand your testimony. From your examination of the remains, any of the fractures that may have occurred to the skull bones, you're indicating that would have been post-mortem, meaning after death. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
You
correct.
can't say that any of those occurred prior to the baby's death?
No.
Okay. Doctor, would you expect to see any evidence of trauma to the bones if a child was suffocated?
No, you couldn't see evidence of suffocation in the bones.
And would you expect to see any evidence of trauma to the bones if a child was drowned in water?
No, you wouldn't see evidence of drowning in the skeleton.
Okay. Did you also have an opportunity to examine the skeletal remains, the bones, for any indications of burning or thermal damage? I'm sorry.
I didn't see any evidence of burning or thermal damage to any of the skeletal elements that I had to observe. Yeah.
And you're only looking at the skeletal remains, the bones themselves, is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that mean that the child could not have been burned?
I just looked at the skeleton, so I could not say if the soft tissues were burned or not. All I can say is I didn't see any evidence of burning to the skeleton.
Doctor, would it be possible to have burning to skin or tissue that doesn't go all the way down to the bone?
Yeah, so if you think about how the body's constructed, the first tissues that the flame would be in contact with would be your soft tissues. So the flame would have to burn away all those soft tissues like the skin and the muscles before it came in contact with the bone in order to char or discolor the bone underneath.
Doctor, are you aware of a report provided by a defense expert, in this case, Dr., I sometimes pronounce it correctly, Sims or Symes?
Sims.
Sims, I'm sorry.
Yes,
And did you have an opportunity to review that report?
I did.
And are you familiar with Dr. Sims?
Yes, I am.
And how are you familiar with him?
We're a relatively small field, so he's another board-certified forensic anthropologist.
Okay. When you reviewed the report from the defense expert, did you find that it differed from your report in any way?
No, we came to the same conclusions independently in terms of the approximate age of the infant at full term, that there was no thermal damage or burning that was noted to the bones, and that any of the alterations that were noted on the bones were post-mortem, meaning that they happened after the death of the individual.
Doctor, did you prepare a report summarizing your findings?
I did.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 113. You can take a look at that and tell me whether you recognize what you're looking at.
Yep, this is my complete report.
And doctor, other than the exhibit sticker that's been placed on that report, have there been any alterations or deletions made to that report?
Not that I can observe. No.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Ritzkers, you may inquire.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And you and I have talked on the phone, but we've never met.
That's correct.
Bottom line, and I know I'm beating a dead horse, is that none of the fractures is evidence of any homicidal actions, correct?
All of the fractures and punctures and the abrasions, all the alterations that were noted on the remains happened after the death of the individual.
I apologize, I don't have your report up here. I have your report. When was that dated, by the way?
I don't have it in front of me either, so I'm not sure of the exact date off the top of my
It's in
head.
the file.
The exhibits up there, on the exhibit stand.
Do you know the date?
I don't, I just know the report's up there.
It's January 26th of 2018.
Approach. If you don't mind, Doctor, look at the date.
Yes,
That's all I know.
January 26th of 2018. Okay, you're welcome.
Did you only send that report to the prosecutor?
Yes,
You didn't send it to Dr. Allen, who's now known as Dr. Brown?
I only sent a copy to the prosecutor.
By the way, I heard you say at the beginning you studied under some different forensic anthropologists. Was Dr. Sims one of those?
No.
But you know him.
Yes, sir.
And does he have a great reputation in your community of forensic anthropologists?
Yes, sir, but it's also not my job to qualify the other experts in this case.
I just wanted to know his reputation.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Knippen?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you, Doctor. You can step down. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to break for lunch. Remember the things that I have previously told you. You need to stay away from any media coverage. Don't read about this case on the internet or do any investigation on your own. Also, do not begin to think about how you should decide the case or begin to talk about the case amongst yourselves. Let's plan on being back in the jury room with the idea of getting started at 1:40. Mr. Mullins, you can take the jury out. Counsel approach, please. All right, we are on the record outside the presence of the jury. All right, we had some objections at sidebar. Mr. Ricker specifically regarding the testimony of Dr. Brown. You voiced an objection to her use of some of the other reports. I think Dr. Schmidt's report. Is there anything additional you want to place on the record concerning that issue?
No, Your Honor, I think we cleared it up at sidebar.
Okay. I mean, the sidebar is not part of the record, so if you want to make anything part of the record.
I don't.
All right, does the state wish to put anything of record on that?
No, Your Honor, not on that.
And I think also at sidebar, in a separate objection, there were objections from the state to the use of certain emails and correspondence and so forth. Is there anything the state wants to put of record as to those issues?
Your Honor, I had objected to the use of the email between, or the series of emails between Mr. Knippen and Dr. Murray and then being brought into evidence or introduced into evidence by way of Dr. Brown. She was not party to those emails on either end, and I believe that they would constitute hearsay.
I apologize, hearsay.
Hearsay.
Okay, I think the cautionary instruction that I gave to the jury is sufficient. So those objections are going to remain as previously ruled upon. I think I've had the opportunity to review the autopsy report. I don't think the autopsy report requires any redaction. Is there any disagreement as to that?
Can we talk about that at a different time, Judge?
Okay.
My mind was not on that aspect.
Okay. And is Exhibit 112 an agreed-upon exhibit?
That's the PowerPoint
Yes,
presentation, is
the
that correct?
PowerPoint.
We can agree, and if we can put just an exhibit sticker instead of
I've
state.
got there's an exhibit sticker on.
Just
the
as
PowerPoint.
exhibit sticker.
I'm just trying to figure out if there's going to be an objection as to that PowerPoint, because I don't know specifically that that it qualifies under the expert report exception. I'll allow it in if nobody's going to object to it.
We don't have an issue as long as we can post it as a joint exhibit.
That
You have a
part I
problem with
don't
that? If you remember, Steve, we would have subpoenaed her had you not. We would have brought her in. So let's just do a joint exhibit. It may cut the trial short, because I don't think we may not bring in Sims based on her testimony.
So it will make everybody happy if we scribble out state and write joint, and it'll still be number 112, so we can keep track of it.
Do we have any stickers that say joint exhibit? If we do, we'll just put that right over it.
But it's still going to remain number 112 for the purposes of clarification.
Okay,
That's fine with me.
Okay.
done.
Is there anything else? All right, let's plan on being back here. Again, I'd like to start up about 1:40.
Thank you.
All right, we're in recess.